Okay, so this is Professor Marc Kalan. You have been teaching marketing at Rutgers since 2008?
2008, that's correct.
Yep. And you were voted best professor in the marketing major in 2022, 2023. In 2015-16, you were the recipient of Dean's Meritorious Award for Teaching, voted Marketing Professor of the Year by RBS New Work Students 2015. In 2012, you were voted as overall best professor, most liberal teaching methods, funniest teacher, most motivational, most likely to brighten your day, most motivational professor, most knowledgeable professor, best teaching style. This is a lot. Like, what do you think is the reason why you have these many awards in last it's been 17, 18 years in Rutgers?
I've been here about 17 years,
yeah.
and I taught at several other universities as an adjunct before joining Rutgers. So I taught at Fairleigh Dickinson, at Kane, and at William Patterson, and later on I did a course at Montclair as well.
So what is the teaching method you have which is different from most of the professors, which explains with all these awards? What do you think?
Well, we have a lot of really good professors here at RBS. This is a fabulous place. And a lot of them are incredibly smart, smarter than me probably. Yeah. But I bring in many, many years of practical experience. I got out of graduate school in 1976, undergraduate in 73. So I've been in the industry for a long time. And I bring a lot of my industry experience into my classes. Over and over again. I tell a lot of stories. Stories are important. I know you researched and looked at one of my sons who's a storyteller himself and a writer and doing very nicely in his professional career. And I spoke to him about it. And I've written some articles about these skills as well. You need to engage people. I think part of the reason I've been so honored here at Rutgers with a lot of teaching awards, and I'm proud of every single one of them, and I take great pride in what I've accomplished. I've achieved associate professor level without having a PhD, which is relatively rare. There's a few of us, but most not. And I have, one of the things that was important is I've written case studies, I've written articles, I've been published a variety of times. So I've fulfilled some of those technical needs that full-time faculty, tenured faculty have, but have not been very well described for NTTs like myself, non-tenure tracks. But here at Rutgers, we have a parallel track, and so that's pretty amazing and pretty fabulous versus a number of the other schools in the area. So I'm honored to be part of that. But you asked why I've been voted so many awards, and I'm proud to say they're from the dean's office, they're from faculty, and primarily students on both of our RBS campuses, both here in Newark, where we are today, and down in New Brunswick. And I've taught in both areas a lot. And I teach in the graduate programs. I've taught in the EMBA programs. I've taught in the Master Fashion. I teach in the PA MBA, Professional Accounting MBA program. So I've been honored to also teach at the graduate level quite a bit, as well as the undergraduate level. And I find all of them interesting, a little bit different. I think what makes me a little different is my focus and challenge to make my courses individually engaging, to engage my students' minds to think. My field, marketing, doesn't have true, false, yes, no, multiple response answers most of the time. Instead, it's thinking through issues and problems. And most exciting from my perspective is marketing's about people.
And so, people are dynamic.
People are fun, they're interesting, they're challenging. If you look at my personal history, I was not a business major as an undergraduate. I was lucky enough to attend a very good university, the University of Pennsylvania, that has a top-notch business school, which, by the way, my father wanted me to go to Wharton and not go to College of Arts and Sciences. And my mother back in 1969 said, you need to become an educated person first. You can go to graduate school and get those kinds of skills. Go to arts and sciences and learn philosophy and sociology and anthropology. And so I did. And I was a history major.
Oh, really?
I'm a history major, mostly all over the place, but modern European history and more recently a lot of American history. So I really love history. And I incorporate history and the historical perspective into my lectures/discussions because I don't consider my classes, quote unquote, pure lecture classes. And that's important as well. They may be called lecture classes in the curricula. Often they are. But I look at it as modified seminar style teaching. What do I mean by that? Well, certainly for my upper level courses, these days I teach primarily marketing strategy, both undergrad and grad. But historically, as you've looked at my background, you know I've taught brand management, sales management, a lot of intro and marketing management, advertising, behavior classes, consumer behavior, market research. I've taught all of them because they're all important. But what's most important is to create an atmosphere where your students' minds are engaged and thinking. So I call it modified seminar style. Whether I have 20 students or one of my classes this fall has 150 currently registered. Will I get to know them personally?
Yeah.
Highly doubtful in that level. But when I have 50 students, I get to know just about everybody's names. I learned years ago, took me a long time. I used to sit and try to memorize my students' names. And I don't assign seats, but people have this habit of sitting in the same place. So and I point that out as part of the behavioral issues that people go through.
That's very
and
interesting.
you choose a seat the first week you're in class. You come back the next week and that's my seat. Don't you sit in my seat. That was my seat. So I get a lot of the students laugh, but they start to realize it's all about human behavior. It's people making decisions. It's how we approach ourselves. And so even in my lecture style, this coming semester, for example, I'll teach 5 courses. 2 of them will be marketing strategy, which I really enjoy teaching. It's been a lot of fun. And 3 of them will be both here in Newark and down in New Brunswick, intro to marketing, because our department feels that's very important. And when I teach those courses, while they're technically lectures, I embed within my lecture style a lot of questions, some rhetorical, some looking for responses. And I tell my students, raise your hand, I want you involved. It creates an atmosphere where they feel they have a participatory element of it. And that they're listened to, that they have a chance to respond. And of course, it's a certain percentage of those students who respond most often. Some rarely do, they're quiet. But then I run in-class exercises within my strategy courses that require every student to participate. I structure them that way. And at the end of the semester, when I ask for feedback, which I do, by the way, I want my students' feedback, which is pretty good, so I like reading it. It's pretty fun to read. But it's also very helpful, and it helps me structure my classes. And one of the points that comes up, especially from a number of the shyer students, shall we say, some of the international students who might not feel their English is as effective or strong as native-born native speakers, but they know what they have to share is important. And so I ask them to participate in at least a half a dozen exercises during the semester where everybody has to say something, and they'll say later, I would have never done that, but it built my confidence, and now I feel comfortable to get in front of my new peers and present and share. And let's face it, you can be the smartest person around, but unless you can effectively communicate, you're not going to be effective in the world of business. And so I focus my classes on that premise as well, that effective communication, which is an area I'm very interested in. And I actually run workshops, and outside of RBS, I do some work in that area. And I've written articles, about a half a dozen articles about presentation skills and presentation styles. So I get my students involved, engaged. The other thing I do is I tell a lot of stories and some jokes. And if you want to hear them, you got to listen. You got to be focused. You don't want to miss what's going on. And so it's, let's face it, a good professor these days has to be a combination of experience, knowledge, effective communication, and the ability to engage students to be involved, to want to learn.
I want to add one more thing, and this is from your article, empathy. Right? Because, the thing which is making that child, that kid comfortable giving you that feedback is the empathy which you have towards those people you're teaching.
Well, I'm so pleased to hear you say that, because that's not the first thing most people would point out, but it's very important. And it's important to let those who are not the ones who are typically in the front of class, and I mean in a participatory manner, not necessarily a physical manner, although that's important too. In fact, when my classes don't have a full classroom, I block off. I won't let them sit in the last row or two. I force my students down into a reasonable I've been in some very big rooms here at Rutgers with not such big classes. I was in room 2071 down in New Brunswick, which has about 200 seats and I think 197 or something. And I had a class of 30 students. I don't want them sitting all over the place. So I said, you can't sit here, you can't sit there, you can't sit there. There's plenty of other seats. Creates an atmosphere of engagement and creates an atmosphere of people. It's like watching a movie. You can watch it at home and that's fun, but when you watch it in the theater, there's that human energy that you share the laughter, you share the fear, you share the excitement. And so in my classes, I want some of that to happen as well, and for my students to have that experience, which is what I've always tried to achieve. Does every single student get it? No. Do most of them? Absolutely. And the Rutgers students, I'm happy to say, are a really bright group. They really are very interesting, with backgrounds that are interesting. We have such a wide demographic variety, and all of them have things to share. If you're a marketing person, and I like to think I'm a marketing person, then you're focused on human decision making and human behavior. Now, we offer courses like that called consumer behavior and the other elements, and I've taught that multiple times here. But there's something about the engagement factor, something about getting people to work. And then I put them in teams with people they don't know so that nobody's left out. And in whether it's a simulation, as I do semester-long simulation in my strategy courses, or a semester-long marketing plan development for my intro classes, as an example, since those are what I've taught recently, or my Masters of Fashion class last spring. We have projects that put people together to create an atmosphere of co-working, which I think is critically important to have that teamwork feeling in today's professional environment as well. Nobody can do it alone. We can't. Let's face it. It's just too complex. The information is expanding at such an incredibly exponential rate that you can't expect yourself to be an expert in everything. You just can't do it. I'm sorry.
You need a good team who can do particular stuff, and then this is a team effort basically.
You need to be able to allow groups of people to both work together but work separately, to engage to the best of my ability. I try to put people together with different people, demographically or background-wise. Now, my students don't know this. Hello, students, if you're watching now. But I look at gender, I look at names and country of origin if I can, and I try to create diversity in my teams that reflect the kind of diversity that I believe these young students are going to find throughout their careers. The world's changed. I graduated college in 1973. I taught high school for a year, and then I said, this is crazy. I'm going back to college and going back to grad school. I went back, got my master's, went into my chosen field of marketing and consumer products marketing primarily. And I know we'll talk for a few minutes at some point about a little of that, I'm sure, or not, whatever. But I realized that it's that integration, that feeling that makes it exciting, and that when I started in industry, the playing field was different. Corporations were very strong. We were entering an era that moved from you're looking for lifetime employment to you're a cog in a machine that fills important functions, but when your skill set no longer is the needs of the organization, sorry, you're not going to be around. And I've experienced that in my life, so it's true. Doesn't mean there aren't new things to find and do. I've changed careers multiple times. Most of the companies, in fact, almost all of them I worked for, are no longer around. Now, some of their elements may be. Brands that we worked on are still around. The brands that I worked on in Warner Lambert or Thompson Medical or even American Can, they all exist with new owners. So brands have lives of their own, and I try to teach my students the importance of that. But also, I tell them, look around the room. Do you think it looked this way when I was teaching this stuff, when I was, a student in this stuff? It didn't. It was a very different demography gender-wise. Today, believe it or not, we have more women in college than men.
Not in quants.
Well, it's true, and especially in marketing.
Marketing.
Especially in marketing, not in the quantitative as much, but in total numbers. And maybe not in your home area, but you're teaching a lot of engineers. The Chinese also. Big article in today's New York Times about the Chinese focused on STEM subjects and highly
Indians too, I think, in a particular.
Very much so.
Yeah, because of some maybe visa issues and everything. But I see a lot of people in India pursuing marketing as a career, and there are a lot of females among them, and it's opening a lot of opportunities to a lot of people. So yeah, right.
But that's what's happening today. You look around the room, and we are incredibly diverse by gender.
Yep.
We are incredibly diverse. I love looking at the mosaic of people's look, their skin tones, their looks, their...
Yeah.
It's very different.
Yes.
This is the world, though. That's what's so exciting. I say, this is the world you're going to live in.
Yeah.
We are a global organization in a global world now. We're not a small defined. And so you need to learn how to integrate, how to work with people from all the continents of the world. I've been lucky enough to have students from every continent except Antarctica. No penguins have arrived yet, although maybe it could happen yet. We'll see. But from South America to Africa, certainly Asia, and not just all parts of Asia. You know, we here in the West tend to have historically thought of Asia as what we then referred to as the Far East.
Yeah.
Japan, Korea, China, Southeast Asia. I've been to most of those places I've been. We sort of forget that the Indian subcontinent, they're all Asians. Pakistan, Turkmenistan, Pakistan, Afghanistan. This is Asia. All of this is the most populous part of the world. And these people were dominated by Europeans for several hundred years, and no longer is that the case. They want their fair share of the world, and guess what? They deserve it. And they're going to get it. And the economies of India and China and Japan and Korea have certainly demonstrated that part of the world's ability to create incredibly quality items and fulfill needs.
It's one of the fastest growing economy right now. So,
India, I believe, is probably the fastest and has, I believe, just passed China in population as well.
Yeah.
1.4 billion.
And I think if this speed goes on, by 2050, India will surpass China in the overall GDP growth.
Might do. I don't know. If I'm here, I'll be 99 years old, so I hope I see it. But we'll worry about that down the road a bit. But the exciting part is whether you're American-born, whether you're a first generation, Rutgers is an exciting place to be as well, because we have this combination. We are an outstanding state university. We have lots of international students because we have a great international reputation, but we also have a ton of immigrants who are first generation of their family ever going to college. What a great, and I give a speech at the end of my classes, by the way, about the importance of going to graduation and allowing your families the pride of what they're experiencing by your meaning my students, success academically and now professionally. And that's an exciting part for me. That's a great thing. I was brought up in a pretty liberal household, and my parents, especially my mother, were very focused on these areas, that everybody should have an opportunity and a chance. And my brother, my sister, and I, and now our children as well, have all followed this mantra, if you will. You know, and so for me, that's the excitement of teaching here at a place like Rutgers. I have been so lucky. Let me make sure I thank the administration here while we're talking just for a moment for offering me so many wonderful opportunities. And let's face it, it wasn't the beginning of my career. My career started many years before, a good 30 years before I started doing this or more. But I've been able to share all that I've learned, as well as and I'm still involved, by the way. I still do a little consulting and workshops and things. So I still find it exciting. I still find marketing and communication. And for me, marketing is all about communication. Inbound communication, outbound communication. Learning, creating solutions, figuring out those solutions, including the ability to communicate those solutions. And so that's why I've written articles on this subject. And I think you asked me originally, why did my students award me awards? And I believe it's because they feel valued, they learn, they come to class, and the vast majority of them share with me later, it was my favorite class or one of my favorite classes, and I really learned some stuff. It wasn't regurgitation, it wasn't memorization. It was thinking and contemplation. And I think that's the kind of leadership that we need to be developing for the future. I think RBS does a pretty good job. I think we have outstanding faculty. Doesn't mean I mean every faculty member is outstanding. But I think we're lucky to have so many really, really good, experienced people. And our NTT track, of which I'm a proud member and an early member, by the way. I've been here longer than most of the other NTTs, has added greatly to the experience that our students have by coming here. Because the NTT folks, like myself and several of the others, will mention, sorry guys and gals, not going to mention your names here, but they bring their real life experience of what's happened in the world.
Yeah.
And what we know what happens in the world isn't what Mr. Kotler or Mr. Armstrong wrote in their textbooks necessarily. They put down terrific foundational ideas. We happen to use the Armstrong-Kotler book now for our undergraduates. We're all using the same one. That's fine. It's a great textbook. But it's a textbook.
Yeah.
And life isn't a textbook.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to mend rules, and sometimes you have to come up with your own amendments, and this is what life is all about.
Life for a marketing or business professional
Yeah.
is reading what's going on in the atmosphere and creating solutions that are appropriate for what's going on demographically, economically, fiscally, in technology and politics and all of these areas. I find it so exciting because for me, marketing of all the majors that we have in the business area, to me it's the most creative. It's the one that is least structured in what it is. You know, finance, you have a liquidity ratio, you have an asset test ratio, you do accounting, you've got debits, you've got, I mean, there's very specific rules to follow. Right? Supply chain, you better understand how to do Six Sigma, which I don't, by the way, but they do, and all the other elements and the importance of supply chain post-pandemic and global problems. We recognize the value of these skills more and more. But somebody has to figure out what are the needs of the marketplace and how do we solve them. That's the marketer's job.
Yeah.
What are your needs? What are unmet needs or poorly met needs, and how do we solve them? And in fact, in my first lecture, which will happen in my Intro to Marketing classes come fall, one of the things I'll do will be to raise what's the definition of marketing. And there's a formal definition that I share, AMA definition, long, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then there's 3 elevator pitch style definitions. Creating valuable relationships, creating exchanges that satisfy individual and organizational needs. And then what I find to be, and I tell my students, this is my favorite one. Marketing is the identification of unmet needs and the creation of solutions for those needs. That's it. If you can understand that, if the CEO is up in the elevator with you and says, oh, you're our new marketing person, what is marketing all about? I don't understand it. It's the identification of unmet, quote, poorly met needs and the creation of solutions, which includes product, service, communication, distribution, all the other elements. Now, we as marketers can't do it all alone. We're as proud and happy to have the finance people sort of tell us what we can't do. We tell, they say you're spending, I say we're investing. So that's a different concept. The supply chain people, I don't even teach much supply chain at all in my classes. I say you're going to learn from experts. They're tasked with getting raw material and components from wherever they create it to the factory, and post-factory getting that out in front of the consumer. That's pretty important stuff, real important stuff. But our job is to figure out what it is that consumer needs, where they need it, when they need it, how they need it, and to put together those plans and to get all the other functional areas within our organization focused on those specific needs so that each individual component, whether it's the sales team or the promotion team or the advertising group, market research group, research and development group, and I've had the pleasure of working with all of those on ongoing businesses, on new products, on startups. I've had a pretty long career doing a lot of different things, been exciting. But the marketing people are sort of the center. I think of it as a wheel, and we're the hub of that wheel, and everything else is spinning around us. For most organizations, because most are marketing centric. And that's an exciting place for me to be. My job here at RBS is to excite others to understand all of those ramifications so that those students who feel that's an area that works for them, they can see the excitement in it. And we've been pretty successful. One of my former students right now is head of Rayo's Foods for Campbell's Foods. She was at L'Oreal for a bunch of years. She actually rang the bell at graduation. She's that good. And she's been a guest lecturer for me a couple of times. And Amanda's fabulous. So that's the quality of people that we're having. She's now involved with all sorts of new products under the Campbell's Corporation for the Rayo's brand of Italian foods. I mean, we have great people. I have several of my former students are brand managers at M&M Mars or Johnson & Johnson. Excellent, outstanding young people who are working for excellent, outstanding organizations. And so if we can get good students and get them excited, then that's a great future for them and for RBS. It reflects very, very well on us. So I find that to be part of what I find very exciting. And so even when I read on LinkedIn about my former students doing great things, I'm very proud of them. And it makes me feel good to know that I have been an influence at some level, maybe minor, maybe a little more, on many of the decisions they may have made or getting them excited about being in the field they're in. That's been great.
Yeah, and I think you're doing a pretty well job, because as you explained the definition of a marketer, I think you are providing the value. You identified that this is the need. This is what most of the professors, some of the professors are not able to provide. And this is what I can bring to the table, and you are bringing that to the table, and people are getting motivated because of you. And I think that's a pretty good thing which you have been doing. And this explains why you have all these awards with you.
I guess that's where we started.
Actually, because you just mentioned about these consumer brands, and I was reading about you, like your commentary on Wawa, your commentary on all the articles and everything you have written about. So I had this question in my mind, because you also mentioned about the psychology part, like to understanding the arts and sciences as in your undergrad, about history, about anthropology and everything. And I have been reading a lot about like how brand works, and I also talked about this in my previous podcast about like how brand thinks about the people, what are the needs, and psychology, and also one of the thing, evolutionary psychology, which I have been reading about, plays a very important role. So according to you, what has been changed from the time when you were working in these companies and right now?
I haven't forgotten it.
Okay.
The time, what's changed?
As a consumer behavior and psychology part.
Well, a lot of things. First of all, technology has changed the playing field so amazing. We all have cell phones now, then they're smartphones. I remember when I finally got a smartphone, my students clapped for me. Every single one of them had an iPhone, and I still had a flip phone of some sort. And they were very cute. So adopting technology for me has never been the easiest thing. I'm not a technologist. I'm a practical guy. What's changed? The consumer markets have changed, the demographics have changed, the economy has changed. Perhaps the way we distribute and sell things have changed. That means the retail playing environment has changed. Amazon, I remember when Bezos started Amazon in 94 and 95, I think it was 95. And I said, this guy, and I was in an internet startup in 1997, so I wasn't that far behind. And I had said at the time, I think this guy's an idiot. He's trying to sell books online. First of all, in the 1990s, very few people were online. I learned that for a fact in a company I worked for, Planet U. We couldn't find enough people. We actually sold the company and did okay to News America. It's one of the few times I got out of a company whole, so to speak. And Bezos got, and then I said, you're selling books. People are reading less and less. Why would you sell books? But of course, his vision was much bigger, and things changed after 2000 as the world started to change, and he convinced investors, I have the solution, and he invested and invested and invested. And let's face it, it changed the marketplace. Today, I told you I'm getting my house ready to sell.
Yeah, Florida.
My wife decided, well, the one up here, I'm not selling it down there. My wife decided just the other day, we've changed a lot of the older lighting fixtures to make my house 125 years old. So I wanted to make it look a little more current. Decided we better do these two in a bathroom that we had renovated, but the fixtures were sort of old and had a little rust on them. They weren't so good. So she calls Amazon, orders on Amazon, and a day later we have two fixtures delivered to our house. This is a major change in how we do business. This is not how it's been done. And so our students need to understand how consumers think differently. We don't think of waiting anymore. We want instant gratification.
Yep, exactly. This is the point which I wanted to ask with the consumer behavior, because people have been consuming a lot of short form content nowadays. That's why the advertisement is also changed. You can't come up with a long form advertisement now because you can't engage people on a long form advertisement because of this short term gratification thing.
I would say there's two things going there. One is the attention span of most people have shrunk dramatically. That causes part of the problem, and I'm aware of that. Try lecturing 50 to 100 people for 3 hours and keeping their attention. And at the end, still having plenty of energy, and your students are more exhausted than you are, but they get it, and they come up to you after class. And this is true, it's one of the most gratifying things you'll ever hear when they come to you and say, I can't believe the class went so quickly, it didn't feel like 3 hours. And my response is very simple. That's because you were mentally engaged and thinking. When you're engaged and thinking, time flies. And when you're reading PowerPoints and being told to copy notes, time just drags on and on. And if you have a professor, and I say this with all appropriate deference to really good professors, but some of them stand up there and just read slides in a monotone boringness. And that's the best way to put everybody to sleep. If you could bottle that and put it into a sleep aid, you'd probably win. And I worked in the sleep aid category for a little bit of time, so I actually understand
You
that
have all the
category.
experience in the world.
I've worked in lots of categories. Sleep aids was a very interesting 6-month experiment thing. I had to do at Wonderland and new products. So that was a very interesting. I learned a lot. And the marketer should always be learning. Things are changing. They're altering. And the fact that we continue to learn is so exciting. When you stop learning, maybe part of the reason I delayed stopping my professional career, and I'm still here, I'm still going on, is that when you stop learning and stop growing, you don't live the same. To me, there's always more stuff to learn. I read historical novels, I read biographies, I shared a few of those, and I read a lot of trash too, by the way, which is fun, escapist novels, if you will, because there's just so much going on. It's so fun. So I like to challenge my students to think that way. And when I get the feedback that this was my favorite class, or this was a great class, or the time just flew, or I really learned stuff that was valuable. It wasn't the same stuff over and over again. And my response always is, that's because you're engaged, you're thinking. And you're thinking because I'm challenging you to think, and you're finding the atmosphere work. So, you know, I told you I tell stories. My son Elliot's a writer, and he writes stories and does podcasts and does books and comic books, and he was the head writer on The Daily Show. He's the head writer on Mystery Science Theater 3000, and now he's I can't tell you about it, but he's a new top, even above the head writer. Now he's going to be the showrunner for a new Netflix series that'll be out in about 2 or 3 years, an animated series, and he's into animation. But I spoke with my son, and I said, Elliot, what makes this work so well? He says, well, you know, the great speakers in history were storytellers. Lincoln, he loves Lincoln. My grandson's name is Lincoln. Samuel Lincoln Kalan. That's how much my so team of rivals, which we talked about briefly. My son is so into Lincoln, he took a vacation to Illinois to go see Lincoln's burial place in Springfield, Illinois, and he named his son after Lincoln. So obvious. But what he said to me, my son, who's this pretty successful writer and performer and other things, is you need to engage, and stories engage people. Jesus, Muhammad, Gandhi, they all spoke in parables, they spoke in stories. And notice these are all different cultures, religions, parts of the world, but the process of human beings being engaged isn't different. It's very consistent. And so I try to incorporate that in my style, but I must say, I don't do it as an objective that I have to do that, but rather this is just my natural style. And I can digress. I go off on tangents in class all the time. And I warn my students. I said, I go off on tangents. Be ready. And I will repeat myself. I'll forget. I teach multiple sections of the same course. I'll end up repeating stuff occasionally. I know it happens. I'm not going to make excuses for it, but rather, this is what makes class fun and exciting. Once in a while, I get a comment from a student. He tells the same story 2 or 3 times or whatever, and fine, I'll take that if that's the punishment. But getting people involved, and I have lots of stories. I've had a really interesting professional career. And you know, as a quote-unquote historian, since it's still one of my hobbies and was my college major, history is about what's gone on, not to know what's gone on. Well, that's important, and I love historical sites, and I read plaques, although it makes my wife crazy. I read historical plaques and things like that, but to learn from them, because as it was Hegel who said, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Same thing in business. Learn from what worked or didn't work. Why did something work? How did people's attitudes change? How did the iPhone, the cell phone, smartphone change our lives? I think, that the folks who did those types of things, who created them, whether it was Steve Jobs or Bill or Gates, and Jobs being critical. To me, Steve Jobs is the Edison of my generation. He's a few years younger than me and unfortunately passed away way too young. But he had a brilliant feeling for the human being and the human need and the human interaction and need for good products that fit how you feel. Even the rounded corners on the phone was something he insisted on and made. He was
a visionary, and
very much,
and I think,
and not a nice guy, by the way, not especially nice guy. Could be pretty nasty, but brilliant.
Brilliant, yeah. But we need these kind of people when you come on this top. And I think one of the example which I just got remembered because of whatever you just said. So in India, it's a very low economy consumer market, and one of the things which I've realized as in podcaster also, like I really want to build this podcast, and people in India who haven't read a lot about things are often get lured by the American economy, the American dream and everything, but they don't realize that the consumer market is very much bigger in India right now, because people are getting money, people are getting paid, and when people are getting paid, when people have money, they spend and they become the consumer. And if you can tap into that market and come up with something interesting which people might need in future, you can become a good businessman. And this is what Netflix and these people did, the subscription model. So in India, people don't have the value of time. Same as like in US, you get paid for hourly rate, right? There's $18, $19 hourly rate. But in India, we don't have this kind of thing. We are just, a monthly salary or a daily wage worker or something. So we don't have that hourly concept. So what people do is people don't know the value of their time. So they spend a lot of time in watching ads rather than paying for the subscription. Oh. So people will watch the full YouTube ad, but they won't pay for the premium subscription. So what these guys started doing is, they were like, I'll keep the subscription fees as, 100 rupees. 100 rupees is basically $1 a month. They're keeping the prices at this level, and they're showing ads in between. So this is how they are making the revenue, by satisfying the consumer, like by understanding the consumer behavior of India, and they're getting revenue from two different sources. One is by the subscription, which is very less, and people are okay paying that. And then
that same model now is here as well. You can do that with Prime.
Okay.
In Prime Video, for example, you can watch things. Well, Hulu, actually, it's Hulu has it, with commercials embedded in them, and you pay a lower fee, subscription fee. A couple of things you mentioned that are very interesting. You said the Indian consumer market isn't as developed as the U.S., and that's true. However, you then have to balance that with there's 4 times as many people in India as there are in the U.S. There's 4 times as many people in China. The U.S., a population about 340, 350 million, and each of those countries are about 1.4 billion. So even if half of the people in those countries are not involved, that's still a market twice the size of the United States. Yeah. When you start to realize that, then you realize these are enormous markets. Yeah. I point this out to my students. I ask them, what country in the world has the highest percentage or the highest number of English speakers? And most of them say the U.S. Of course, they're wrong.
I think it's India or like one of these countries like whose official language is not English.
Correct. And I think it's China. Could be India, but China, all the kids are learning English. Yeah. I taught in China 7 times and always in English. Excuse me, I taught in China 5 times, twice in Singapore, but always in English, and the students are in English. If you think about it, if only 450, 1/3 of their population speaking English, that's still bigger than the United States.
Yeah.
So this is how the world is changing. You'd have to think about it that way. So the consumer market in India is expanding. Do you have serious issues with a lot of people at low economic levels?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, absolutely. Perhaps part of that's the heritage of the caste system of many years ago, which unfairly place certain people in poor economic positions, and I won't talk about how the British facilitated some of that, enabling a small island north of Europe to be able to control half the world at one point.
Yeah, that was insane. Yeah,
Pretty insane. In the 19th century and first half of the 20th century, the British Empire, which is no longer an empire really, but sort of living in reflected glory. And by the way, my daughter and her husband and 2 kids are now British citizens and live in London.
Oh.
They're also American citizens, but my son-in-law has a wonderful career right now in Europe, doing very well, and so they moved there, and
got the citizenship. Yeah.
well, they just bought a 3-bedroom flat, so they're not coming back so quickly.
Right.
They were going for 2 to 3 years. That was 10 years ago. They're still there. But the point is, the world is changing economically. The world is changing educationally. The world is changing demographically. Those quote-unquote nationalities and cultures that controlled most of what we look at as history. And remember, history is written by the winners.
Yeah.
It's always written by the winners, not by the losers. You lose, you're going to die. You're not going to be the, so I'm a historian kind of person. History is written by the winners. So we look at history, even here in the United States, from a very Western European perspective. And we sort of forget that things were happening in China or Vietnam and Cambodia or the Koreas or Japan. Brilliant histories and many other cultures and areas, of course, as well as India, which had these enormous cultures, and the other stand countries, if you will. So the world's changing, and all the rest of the world wants its fair share of the world's resources. What percentage of the world's population is in the United States?
Very low. I think it's
approximately
around single digit percentage.
Are you asking or telling?
I'm telling.
You're correct.
Right.
How single?
I would say 6 to 7% around.
Between 4 and 5.
Oh, okay.
So America is, let's round it up and be aggressive, 5% of the world's population. Then the question comes, and we're so lucky, those of us who either were born here or came here under our own volition, which I would have found very hard to do. My family came in the 1880s, 1890s, basically, from Eastern Europe, where they were living in poverty and very poor, to the New World, a chance as my ethnic group had its chance to come here during that wave of heavy immigration into the United States. So how lucky am I that I was born here several generations in? But we use 25% of the world's resources. We're only 5% of the world's populations. That can't continue. That just is unrealistic. And as China, India, now Vietnam is emerging, South Korea, as well as Japan are powerhouses, economically and production-wise. South America, not quite the same, but they're coming out of it too. Brazil has a vibrant economy, as does Chile and Argentina. I've been to Brazil, to South America a couple of times. So and Europe is revitalized. It's not in the dregs post-World War II. How do we get out of this? It took a lot of years to rebuild. So the rest of the world is demanding, Africa will be next, of course, because it's the growing continent, its fair share of the world's resources, the world's goods. And so it means a different approach for marketers. And I like to make sure my students understand. And since many of them have international backgrounds, I think they get it. We have students here from Nigeria, we have students from South Africa, we have students from all over the world, Colombia, Ecuador, Chile, Brazil. I've had students from all of these fabulous places, down in the Caribbean islands where they were, we laugh as Northerners up here in North America, we get to go to the Caribbean for a week and we look at the people working down there and we say, they're working so hard. Yeah, we work hard up north. They're in this beautiful place the whole year round. We come for a week, for our vacation to the DR, to Jamaica or something. And so the world is changing. The other thing that changed the world a lot is air travel. Being able to get from one place to another. And now, with the internet, we have instantaneous communication to almost everybody. When I was teaching in China, 12 time zones different than where my family was here, we were able to talk and communicate and look at each other with FaceTiming. This is amazing. So we as professional business people need to understand communications changing, transportation's changing, supply chains are changing. The need and desire for different and new solutions for different things are changing. On top of that, certain types of businesses flow to low-wage economies while other economies focus on upscale. Look what's happening today with AI chips, and in China or Japan or Korea. Those countries are way ahead in those areas, and yet we used to say products made in China were low quality. Today they are many of the highest quality in the world. Before that it was Japan. When I was a kid, we had a euphemism for products made in Japan that wasn't very complimentary. I'm not going to repeat it because it wasn't complimentary. And then things changed. Companies like Sony or Panasonic rose to the top of their areas. In the automotive industry today, for sure, Toyota, Nissan, Subaru, Suzuki, Mitsubishi, all of these fabulous companies. Today, it's Hyundai, it's Kia, it's Hyundai's
Tesla.
Genesis brand. So now Korea's developing and selling. I had a Hyundai, by the way. It was a fabulous vehicle. Well, lasted for 12 years. I had a Hyundai Santa Fe. It was a great truck. Was it glamorous? No. Today, my brother just bought a Genesis, which is very upscale. My brother's a retired physician. He's able to do that. Very great. But my point is, quality products are being designed and developed throughout the world. We need to work with the rest of the world, not against the rest of the world. And of course, that's what's created these supply chains where when something breaks down, whether it's through the Houthis in Yemen, blowing up ships or trying to fire on ships coming up through the Red Sea, or some other natural disasters, or a ship gets stuck in the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal, and what that causes around the world. These are practical aspects of things that our business school students here from America, and RBS, of course, need to have a feeling about. So in my courses, I try to give more of a perspective that way as well. To think broader, think larger, and to think not to memorize what was done before, but to understand how that solution helped to solve a problem, so that when the next problem comes along, you have the process. I'm very much in my class about process. The process of dissecting an issue, coming up with potential solutions, getting others to sign on and join you in those solutions, because nobody does anything alone anymore, or very little. And then integrating them into your organization, or if it's not your organization, where do you go with the idea, or how do you... A show like Shark Tank is a great, exciting... It's
when
fun.
I was in 7th grade with my brother, I used to see that, and that is one of the show which made me and my brother very interested in entrepreneurship. So
there you go. That's great. Yeah. So to me, Shark Tank has been a wonderful stimuli to so many people, and it's entertainment too. So you got to recognize, Kevin isn't
spicy.
Mr. Wonderful isn't always so wonderful, but he's playing a role there, and Mark Cuban's playing a role, and Laurie Grenier is playing a role, and Hershovik's playing a role, and Damon John or Barbara. They're all playing these roles, but they're also stimulating people to be excited about creating new business.
Think basically, and come up with those creative things which maybe the world need.
Well, listen, things change in the world as well. When I started marketing, and I work in food, beverage, health and beauty aids, consumer packaged goods. We didn't have things that were gluten-free. We didn't have all natural. A lot of the things that we look at today to create new spaces for products, they just didn't exist. So today, as they do exist, I have these gluten-free or these sugar-free or these all-natural. By the way, all-natural means nothing. Legally, it doesn't have any meaning, but it does in a consumer's perspective and in how we look at things. And so the one thing I add to the definition of marketing when I give the initial definition is I give the formal AMA definition, and at the end I add, and I tell my students, this is my adding, in a dynamic environment. We need to think about being in a dynamic environment. Things are dynamic. Things are changing all the time. And you need to, if you're an existing organization, stay up to what's changing. I spent several years in new products thinking about that, and then in entrepreneurial startups, about 15, almost 20 years doing that. So you have to think about what's changing. Is it sourcing of materials? Is it regulations by government? Is it problems with the environment? If you don't think we have environmental issues in front of us, whoa, are you going to lead us down a bad path? I really believe that. And how do the various political factions in various countries in the world reflect these issues? So the other thing, I never tell anybody what to vote. My political leanings are not hard to figure out, frankly, but I don't tell my students you have to vote like I would vote. But what I do tell them is if you are legally qualified to vote in this country, then please do. I'm not telling you who to vote for, but I know that we live in a better society when more people are involved, when more people are engaged. And so I want my students, I say, if you don't like what's going on, then make some efforts to change it. I come from a very political generation. I was in college during the Vietnam War and those time periods where in America we had huge turmoil. It was a very challenging time. And so I suggest to them, be involved. And then, even if your candidates aren't elected, mine aren't always elected. They aren't, unfortunately. A number
Now
of them
I know
I
your
like.
political party.
Well, this isn't politics today, but it's talking about history and the implications. At least you can be the loyal opposition. I always like that phrase from the British Parliament, the loyal opposition. We share things in common, even if we disagree with a lot of issues. And we should have and unfortunately in America, I think we're having some challenges in that area the last number of years. I hope we figure that out in this year's election. We'll see.
And I think because you mentioned this point, this is the exact point which I wanted to talk about, but just in the context of marketing. And I think we'll come to the politics part also. I have few different questions which I need your perspective about. And but before that, so when it comes to advertising and when it comes to marketing, and we see all the ads on Instagram coming up, we see all the social media posts and all the campaigns and everything. How difficult it's becoming for a lot of businesses nowadays because of this woke culture. And when I say woke culture, because whatever you post on social media, there is a possibility that this might get cancelled on Twitter, on Instagram, and this. So it's very difficult for the marketer nowadays to come up with a good campaigns and everything, because if they're coming up with something sensational, there's a possibility of people cancelling that company or product.
Anything's possible. I never totally understood this whole concept of woke between you and I hear people speak, oh, it's woke this and woke this, and I'm thinking, can you define what woke really is for me? I still don't totally get it. However, the job of the marketer is to spend the time, the focus, the energy, the thought to figure that out. That's our job. We have to figure out. We do research. We have wonderful research tools. That's one of the core marketing courses here in our major. Intro to Marketing, Market Research, which I always recommend as the next course to take. That's the toolbox to learn. That's what research is. It's a toolbox to learn. Then consumer behavior. Once we get some learnings, how do we make decisions? How do people think about things? How do they approach them? Those are the 3 required courses before you should take your electives of advertising or sales management or whatever, the brand management, etc. Now we'll have some AI stuff. We have digital marketing, which is really just a tool to direct the same stuff. It's a technology. Digital stuff isn't thinking different, but it's using a different technology to deliver, to communicate. And some of the things you mentioned, all the social medias, for example, fall into that area. I taught our first digital marketing program here.
Oh, really? Because
I did, a long time ago.
I was talking to one of the person, Oliver, and I think she's into digital marketing.
Probably.
And so I was talking about this, and I think this is very important. And AI, the usage of AI is very important nowadays in designing, in copywriting, and in coming up with good campaigns and advertisement. Because I have been using generative AI to get good copyrights, and so my brother is running an agency back in India, and he makes landing pages for a lot of e-commerce brands, and he was telling me about all the copywriting things he does with ChatGPT. So he has made these chats, well-defined chats just for the copywriting, and it's all automated. He just have to put what is the business, what it's all about, and he has one of the best copies like of ever, sales pitch and sales funnel. So all these things,
That's great. Not sure if I love hearing that it's templated, because I think great advertising comes from being unique and different, but that's a whole different genre to talk about. But what we do have is a very interesting environment, and things are changing. One of the exciting things about marketing is there's always learning to be done. There's always changes happening. We have changes in technologies, changes in eating habits, changing in restaurants, change in product distribution. Look at all these things that are going on and on all the time. And so as a professor of same, shall I say, my job is to open you or other students' eyes up to what are the possibilities, what are the challenges, because they're going to change. I'm not going to be here in 5 or 10 years.
Yep.
Challenges will continue to morph, to grow, to alter. Here, we need to give our students some knowledge of experience and some of the tools that they will benefit from. And most importantly, I think, a love of learning and growth.
Yeah.
Love of learning. I taught middle school for a couple of years between my full-time marketing job and my full-time professor job here. I was actually teaching 5th, 6th, and 7th grade language arts and social studies, 3 years. And at night I was teaching
language arts and social studies.
Yes.
These are like
English and language arts is the fancy name for English, what we used to go when I was a kid, and social studies, history. And I taught both. And that was middle school, which I liked, actually. It was fun. But I was at the same time teaching at night at college, undergraduates and graduates. So I never quite knew who I was talking to. It was pretty confusing. But to me, the fun was always being engaged in the classroom. And I did both simultaneously. And then for circumstances that worked out for me, I ended up here full time, which is pretty wonderful.
And I think you were, if I'm not wrong, you were a part-time bus driver for a school bus.
Not exactly.
What was that?
I will tell you. So when I was transitioning in around 2006, I was going to teach middle school or high school. I was applying for jobs. I held certificates already, by the way. I have language arts, social studies, and elementary school. I'm an HQT. That's called highly qualified teacher. I scored very high on the exams, which, by the way, scares me who is really teaching. If I scored so high and I hadn't studied this topic in 30 years, it makes me a little nervous as to who's really teaching our kids. But that being said, during the summers, I needed to do something. So I had a friend who bought a summer camp out in Long Valley, New Jersey. So I called him up and I said, Jed, the guy I knew through business, but I also knew personally on the side as well. Jed, I'm looking to go teaching, but if I sit home all summer, my wife will absolutely kill me. You have a camp. He said, come on out and talk to us. So I came out and basically became the transportation supervisor working for the camp director. So it was the two of us, ran the whole transportation system. I got a driver's license to drive buses so I could back people up. The driver's sick or we went on a trip or something, so I could drive 16 to 24 seat buses. And I did. I drove them, and I did that for 15 summers. So I wasn't really a part-time bus driver, but I did have a license, and I did drive around in buses for 2 months during the summer. 39 glorious days, as I used to say. 8 weeks, less 1 day for July 4th when we didn't have camp. So, and I did that for a while. So I had a driver's license, a bus driver's. I've done lots of crazy things in my life. So I was a bus driver a little bit, and it was fun, and the kids were adorable. But it wasn't for schools. It was for summer camp.
Okay.
I was teaching full-time. And by the way, when I was doing that, I was also teaching summer school at night. And I'd literally drive a bus from Long Valley, New Jersey to either New Brunswick or Newark, park here, and then teach a course at night. And I would teach generally 2 courses during the summer as well.
No, I think this is one of the best experience you might have had in your lifetime. And I think I also seek for these kind of experiences. I mostly try my best to volunteer, even if I'm not getting paid for it, because you don't know what you'll learn from that and what you'll get in, not in the terms of money. You'll get something in terms of experience, and
Absolutely.
That is important. That you don't know how it's going to help you in future, because I think I've done a lot of things in the part of volunteering, and that is all paying me off, because I learned how to talk to people. The thing which you're telling me, telling stories. This is what I learned. It's not I don't deliberately try to tell stories. It's again it's just part of the nature, because
you don't want to bore people with that,
Exactly.
but you want to engage them and get them thinking.
Yep.
And hey, it's fun to talk about things I've done in my career. I'm very lucky. I can talk about the Schick Razor programs we did, or some of the other fun stuff I did, or installing electronic signs in 5,400 supermarkets, and then selling advertising message spacing on those signs that tied a specific SKU item into a price in that store at that day, and so that was early technology, and I was involved in that for 8.5 years. That was great. So all those kinds of things were great. When I was in college, I managed a hoagie steak shop for 2 nights a week.
What was that?
Hoagies are like hero sandwiches, submarines. In Philadelphia, they're called hoagies. Right, so if you went to Wawa, it would be a hoagie, for example. And I went to college in Philadelphia, so I worked there, or cheesesteaks, steak, cheese, and blah, blah, blah. So I did that 2 nights a week, and the first year I just worked as a worker, and then I managed 2 nights a week for the next couple of years. And it was fun. I actually found it was more fun than doing other stuff at college. Unfortunately, I was at a great university. I should have taken advantage of all those great things at this fabulous Ivy League university. But here I was making cheesesteaks and roast beef sandwiches, and
it's fun. Actually,
having
it's fun
doing it. It was fun.
It's fun. And I think so. This is what I do. So last year I was in Himalayas. So there's this.
Really?
Yeah. So I like to hike. I hate going to the city most of the times, but if someone asks me, in the middle of the night that Lakshay, we are going to this hike, I'll be ready in like half an hour. So I went to this hike, and it was a pretty good hike. It was a offbeat village in Himalayas, and I was in that place. I was going for a hike. It was almost like 7 kilometers of hike. I was on the top, and someone told me that, when you go on the top, there's a small hut, and there's a guy. I think you'll love to meet him. I'm like, okay, let's see. I saw the hut, and I went inside. I knew the name of the guy, and I was like, hey, hi, this person told me about you, and I just wanted to sit and talk to you. I started talking to the guy. He was a master's or a PhD in physics. He was just in the mountains, just making his tea, sleeping, enjoying the weather, and he knew a lot about philosophy and psychology. We were talking about, free will and determinism, a lot of deep philosophical concepts, and we talked for like 2 hours.
Nice.
And I was like, this is the experience which I wanted. Like, this is what, and there's no one listening to me, right? There's no one around me, and I don't think I need that validation from the people who are around me right now. I'm just enjoying this moment, and I'm just feeling proud of myself. So I think this is why it is important to, engage people and talk to more and more people and tell your story to the world.
People are not always who you think they are or what you think they are.
True.
And some of them have very interesting stories, and others are fairly boring, by the way. But people are very interesting. I like people, basically, and not everybody likes people,
Yeah.
But if you want to be a good marketer, I think you have to have an innate interest in humans and human behavior.
Curiosity, you mean?
A good curiosity, absolutely. That's a good word to use, probably.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at their issues and their problems. Remember, go back to my definition. The identification of unmet or poorly met needs and the creation of solutions. Those solutions can be products, they can be services, but the solution itself includes manufacturing, distribution, communication, information, all of those various aspects, promotion, which is why, from my perspective, marketing continues to be a fun, exciting, interesting area. I like to walk through stores and look at packaging and shelves, and it always takes me a lot longer than it should because I stop and I look at stuff and I like how it's shelved and what's on the bottom and what's on the top.
What's the interesting thing you have seen like in few weeks or few months in a supermarket? Which is like changed over the time?
They're changing all the time. So I go to a variety of different stores at different times. I really like Trader Joe's for what they do. I like ShopRite for what they do. My wife likes Whole Foods. We live very close to a very large Whole Foods as well, or King's, which is another upscale chain. And they're all a little different. I like to see how they merchandise products. And I like to see how they shelve and how they promote different items and what they do to do that. To me, that's just interesting and fun, and that's what I did. I did promotional marketing. I was either on the client side or the vendor side, but it was always, I was a vendor to brands and brand teams to assist them in marketing their products better. And So you ask about what have I seen in a store recently? My local ShopRite, which was an older store, has been renovated relatively recently. Looks great now. Several people I know said, "Oh, I won't go there because it used to be small and dirty," and I never thought that, by the way. But it's the same owner of all the ShopRites and the same. They said, "Go to this one instead." I said, "They're identical. They make the same product. It's the same warehouse, the same owner group. Happens to be Village ShopRites. They're a co-op." So what I like to see is how they're changing what they're offering and what items are becoming more important and how you shelve them and how you display them. To me, that's fun stuff. I'm not sure it's going to groundbreak anything so big. I don't know if I have any. I like the way they expand new areas. They find new and which ones they'll focus on and put into display areas or products that come and go and the variety of products. I'm forever amazed. How many items do you think there are in a large supermarket? How many unique SKUs?
Unique SKUs. I think this I have listened in one of the episode of Shark Tanks. I may be wrong, but I think it's around like 10,000 or something. Like it's these many SKUs there.
Trader Joe probably has 10,000.
Okay.
And they're tiny.
Oh, and they're tiny.
And they're tiny. A real large supermarket like a big ShopRite or the big Walmarts now that could have as many as 120, 130,000 SKUs. Now, you're the marketer. How much time do you have to catch someone's attention as they're walking up and down the aisles?
Few seconds.
Not even a few seconds. So you have to set up the proposition, get good shelving, get good support, pricing has to be right, and you have to have the right messaging in the right place at the right time to attract. And this is part of what I did as VP marketing for in-store advertising for all those years, was helping to understand this kind of stuff. So the truth is, the market is an amazing place. Just go and look at the hot sauce section. You probably like hot sauce. Look at how many, there's gotta be a couple of hundred different SKUs just there. And they're tiny, it's this much shelf space. So we're so lucky here in America that our distribution system of goods and services is so well developed, and we have such an amazing array of opportunities to us. I sometimes laugh about it. We go to the store and we're mad if they don't have the exact long stem strawberries we wanted today. They only have bulk strawberries, right? Or something of that nature. And what I mean is we have such a wide and incredible variety. My wife might say to me, "What do you want? What do you think we should get, or what should you get at the market?" I say, "I never know till I go. Let me see what's on sale. What's." She goes, "Well, sales, just trying to get rid of extra stuff." I said, "No, those sales are planned 9 months to a year in advance. That's all planned out. They're managing their inventories, they're managing their movement, and there's just so much there." So I find that fascinating. We're so lucky here in America. And even when I've traveled to other countries like in South America or Asia, I like to go into the stores and look and see what they have because it's just different.
And I think so. This is very interesting thing which I did. So there's a very small store, like a normal grocery store sort of thing. I went there and I was like, okay, I was roaming. So the way they place their drinks, the beverages, like there are a number of freezers and they're putting like these are the main ones, so they'll put it in the front. And when I went to the cashier, so they have put this basket sort of thing there, and they were like chocolates. So you get tempted to get one of those.
Impulse purchasing.
Exactly. Impulse purchasing, and this is what we did yesterday. So it was like 11:30 p.m. and see, the ShopRite is so accessible. So it was about to close at 12, and we were watching a video on YouTube. So the guy was sitting in a big like farm. It was really good in mountains, and he was cutting watermelon. So we were like, dude, I really want to eat watermelon. So we have 5 people, we have 5 roommates, and we were like, you know what? Let's get a scooter. So we just got a scooter. I went to ShopRite. We got a watermelon. But there was a bakery just beside the ShopRite, and there was a area for the bakery. We went there. You know what? Let's get a tres leche too. We got a pineapple too. So so they tempt you by placing these things.
Well, see, you say they tempt you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't describe it that way.
Okay.
I would say they're showing you the possibilities to stimulate your interest in additional items or different items that may either be items that complement what you were buying or supplement what you were buying or introduce you to something new.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's part of our job, but they're not forced. They're not twisting your arm and forcing you to buy it, right?
Yeah.
We're so lucky we have such a wide variety of choice here. That's why I find walking through markets so fascinating. And I look at things and I say that who's going to buy that one little thing on the lower shelf?
Yeah.
You can hardly see it, but you know what? If they didn't sell some of it, they would discontinue it. They know it's all captured on computers now. Now it's very easier than when I first entered the industries, and they literally did hand audits.
Yeah,
Nielsen went in bi-monthly, every other month, did a hand audit, read what was on the packing, what came into the store. They knew what they had the previous audit. They could figure out what was sold, and they created Nielsen measurements. That was the company Nielsen, and that was what I learned on back in those years. Today, beep, 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 it's all captured instantly pretty much, and it's fascinating, but who buys all this stuff? I have no idea. That's why I find going in stores fascinating and looking at, do we need 30 different types of tomato sauce in a ShopRite? They got to be at least 30 brands.
Yeah, they have it.
From low to upscale, from ones that have a lot of garbage in them, frankly. They're $1.99 for a big jar, to ones that are a small jar, like Oreos or something.
Premium packaging,
Premium $8.99, $9.99 for us. But you know what? There's a market for it, and that's our job as marketers to figure out which of those segments are not being well served and which are being well served. I mentioned earlier my former student Amanda, who's at Rayo's now as a new products, and she's doing a great job. And Rayo's is introducing lots of new products, soups, frozen items, not just the traditional tomato sauce. That was the first item. And Rayo's, by the way, is a restaurant in the upper Spanish Harlem in New York City is where it's located. It's way up in the Upper East Side, and I think it's in the 90s or the 115s or something. That's a famous old restaurant, and now it's become a brand name, right? So we're also learning in the marketing world, how do we leverage the value of existing businesses? And that's the next big thing, and it's been happening for a long time. But how do you take a small business and keep it growing to be a big business? And that's a tough challenge.
Yeah, scalability has been like a tough issue for a lot of companies, and I think this is one of the mistakes which I figured when I was watching Shark Tank. They used to point it out that, for example, if a business is coming up with like 40 SKUs of their unique brand, they're like, you know what, you should test your SKUs in the market. What if 30 of them are not working? You are just incurring a lot of cost, and there'll be a dead stock, and there'll be a lot of cost involved in this business, which you could have converted into a profit by focusing on those 10 SKUs.
That may be a good strategy. You have to, that's what we do. That's part of our work. That's part of our, I had one project way back when I was promoted to product manager on miscellaneous gum brands, chewing gum.
Okay.
I had been the assistant product manager on Trident gum. This was in 19...
Trident is like one of the popular ones, right?
Yes, it's been around since the 1960s. It was the number one and still is sugar-free gum. It's big business. It was a big brand. When I was on it back in 1978 and 79, it was about a $65 million factory brand, which was a big piece of business back then. I mean, that's the equivalent today of 300 million probably. So it was a big piece of business. And we looked at Trident, and I did that, and then I got promoted to these small brands. One was called Chiclets, which was at one point one of the biggest gum brands in the world, but by that point was a small business. Adam Sours, which was an even smaller business, a tiny one, and Spring Gum, which was a new gum that was failing in test market. And so I was given 3 challenges. Number one, what do you do with Chiclets to keep it alive? Because it was a big overseas brand still. It was very big in South America, made from chicle. That's where Chiclets' name came from. So that was one. Then I had this Spring Gum that was a failed new product, and I had to pull it out of test market, reformulate it, repackage it, change it a little bit, and then get it ready for a new test market. That was Indianapolis, Indiana, was my new test market. And the third was a product called Adam Sours. It was an old brand. Adams was the parent company of the American Chicle Company originally, and that was owned by the Warner Lambert Corporation here in New Jersey, and that's who I worked for. We had 6 flavors, but we had very little business, and they said to me, what are you going to do? You can't maintain 6 flavors. You can't get those facings. between you and I thought the solution was very simple. I did an analysis. It turned out 3 of the flavors represented 75% of the business. It was easy. It wasn't a hard analysis. And so I made a recommendation to eliminate 3 flavors and just go with 3 and use them and focus in basically what you're saying. Don't have so many options because they can't all be used, but find a few options that can be viable. I got such accolades for, wow, that's so smart and how you do. But between you and I didn't think it deserved all that. It was a fairly logical, and we did that. I got promoted 3 months later to the next level because I had come up with these solutions for these various brands, etc.
And you were like, where's my bonus?
Yeah, they didn't. Believe it or not, that's a very interesting issue that we won't talk about today, but that level of promotion was not bonus eligible. It was the next level up. And I had a big fight with management that I was not promoted to that level up when I was running the Schick business 2 years later, which should have been. And I eventually left the company because of it. We had a disagreement. So I was the Schick guy for a while too, because we have a little beer today. I was the Schick brand manager, so I know shaving, I know chewing gums. I worked in health and beauty aids extensively. I worked in over-the-counter pharmaceuticals and food products, beverage products. Coke and Pepsi have both been my clients in the past, for example. And I've worked with both of them on different projects.
Then I think, so there's this example which I have, I think you'll relate with this a lot. So there's this Australian brand for pillow covers. Its name is Sylvie. So what these guys came up with, they came up with pillow covers, but this is not how they are marketing themselves. So what they do is like, this is silver ionized pillow cover. It keeps you away from the acne. Like you won't have acne because it's silver ionized, and silver has that antibacterial property. So this is how they are marketing themselves, and they are growing literally very big.
Good.
And this is so me and my brother wanted to work on this idea, and we just came up with, we did few research, we read few research papers, and we came up with that this same thing works with the bronze ionized also, copper ionized. So we were like, what, let's get silk, and we did add one more thing. We added mulberry silk. So there's mulberry silk and there's bamboo silk. So for the people who are like vegan, you can have a bamboo silk products. So basically, you are not promoting the pillow covers, that this is the pillow cover which you should use on a bed. You are promoting the value which you are providing. Acne-free skin and...
That's the benefits.
Yeah.
That's how you sell products. You don't promote the product. People don't buy products. They buy what products will do for them.
Yeah.
And by the way, I too teach that. In fact, that's part of my strategy course, that people buy the benefits. In fact, in my lecture for Intro to Marketing, one of the things I'll mention will be the concept of what a benefit is. A benefit, the outcome sought that motivates consumer behavior. That's what a benefit is. It's the outcome you're seeking that's going to motivate what you do. If you're hungry, the benefit is you buy food so you're not hungry or thirsty. And I use thirst and hunger in very simple things too that people can easily understand. But you're exactly right. People buy benefits. So you have to look for problems that aren't solved, create the benefit. Quick oil changes for your car. It used to be you had to get an appointment at a gas station when I was a kid, leave your car so the mechanic could change the oil. And then a company like Jiffy Lube and 8-minute oil change come along. Drive in and 10 minutes later your oil's changed, you've gone. It isn't a better oil change. It's a faster oil change. It's an easier one. If you didn't need an appointment. People buy benefits. They buy what something does for them. That's a big lesson that I teach, and I think it's a very important one.
Yeah, I think, and this reflects the understanding of yours in consumer behavior, and I think this is very important. One of the things which I wanted to talk about, that there was a book I was reading, Martin Gutman. I think you shared me the name, right? Martin Gutman. I think it was some book.
I don't think so.
Okay. So I was reading one of the books from like Tom Clancy and so I was like,
Tom Clancy's fun.
Tom Clancy and Stuart Woods, Daniel Silva.
You really did take good notes.
Yeah, I did take good notes. And all these books, these people did talk about military, geopolitics, and like thriller stories, which we were, I think, talking about.
Very much so.
And a lot about the society, the power broker, and about like it was about Robert Moses, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And one of the thing which I liked, I was just reading the summary of this particular book, The Power Broker, and I think I have this relatability from the modern problem in this particular context. He built a lot of, like most of the New York, right?
He built a lot. He was overseeing the construction of a lot of what we today look at as New York infrastructure.
Yeah.
Highways, parks, bridges, those types of things. And he made a lot of that stuff happen. So that's why it's so fascinating. And by the way, a plug here, everybody, if you're watching this podcast, there's a great podcast all about the power broker. And there's two men who are doing it, and every month they do another 100 pages. One of the two men is my son, by the way, in all freedom and sharing. But it's fascinating, and Robert Caro, who is the author, was interviewed once already, and they'll do another live streaming event with him in October 7th, I believe. So, but The Power Broker is a fascinating story of power, and it's a fascinating story, if you love New York, about how New York was developed and designed, how many of the bridges, the parks, and all the other things.
Yeah.
And not all good, by the way. Mr. Caro didn't always, not Mr. Caro, Mr. Moses, because that's The Power Broker, was Robert Moses. Everything he did does not get great praise today, like the Cross Bronx Expressway cutting neighborhoods in half, and the Gowanus Expressway and cutting neighborhoods off, and things of that nature. But he did a lot of amazing things as well. Jones Beach was created under him. The New York World's Fair in '64 was part of one of his projects. He created tons of little parks all over the city. He would drive around New York City looking for underused vacant lots and then try to convert them into small little parks for neighborhoods. Great, wonderful stuff. Not for money. The guy didn't need money. He did it because, and he had 12 different titles and jobs. So if you tried to fire him from one, he had lots of others. So he was almost unpenetrable. He was that, you couldn't get rid of him because he had too many jobs, state and city jobs that he was official for. And they called him the commissioner, and he was just the guy. But anyway, that was a book that was great.
Yeah, and I think one of the things which I was reading about this book was that even if all these things happening, so there was a little argument in the book about a disparity in the communities. Because when you are building as a society, when you are growing as a society, being a capitalist, there's a lot of disparity arises in the society, which we see in America right now. So what do you think about like this rise of capitalism, which happened after the mid of 20th century and which is happening right now? And a lot of people come up with the argument of like being an anti-capitalist or something. I am personally like very pro-capitalist, and I think if you are working hard, you should be paid enough. And so this is one of the things which I highlighted me in this particular book. So what do you think personally about it?
Comment? I teach in a business school. I believe in capitalism. I am not a socialist, although I believe in many socialist ideas that human beings all deserve a minimal level of decent life, and that, and we have some great social programs. I'm a big believer in Social Security, especially now that I'm on it. But I'm a big believer in Social Security and Medicare, in providing a floor for our weakest and poorest that demonstrates that we're a society that cares about people and all. That said, you come up with a great idea, you deserve to be rewarded. You work your you-know-what off, you deserve the fruits of those labors versus the other person who didn't want to work that hard, didn't have the ideas. Everybody should have the opportunity, which I think is what Shark Tank as a show is about. But not everybody's going to achieve. But I'm here at Fabulous Business School. Our mission is to train people to be great business people, because that then helps the overall society. And I truly believe that. I believe our overall society is greatly enhanced. Some people move things forward. Some just support. The vast majority are not going to be new, inventive thinkers. But we need, an army doesn't have to have all generals. It needs a lot of soldiers. It needs a lot of people who can do it. We need people who can facilitate and make things happen, to improve things a little bit. And so I'm a capitalist. I believe that you work hard, you should be rewarded. Now, does that mean you need $150 billion? I'm not so sure that's true. What is the right level of economic support or economic achievement that somebody needs, and when does it really just, how many more toys do you need before you die? Well, you think about it. Let's make a very simple example. We have $1,000. Economically today, one of our political parties, believes let's lower the taxes for wealthy people because they're going to create new jobs. So let's say they have $1,000 and they invest it, they put it in the bank. How about we now have $1,000 and instead of giving all of it to one person because they're going to create jobs, whether they do or don't, it's a very big question, but let's just assume that's it. Or you give 1,000 people $1 each that they then spend on a piece of something at a store. Then the storekeeper takes 90% of that and buys other stuff with it. So that's now 1,000 plus another 900. Now that stuff gets sold and bought again. And you can see how that builds upon itself. I'm a big believer in that. I would rather see 1,000 people or 10 people get $100 each than one guy get $1,000 because the change, the rapidity of how that builds and the utilization, everybody benefits, right? The more people, and that money now becomes a multiplier
It
effect.
speeds up the economic cycle, basically.
Absolutely.
Because people are spending and people are consuming, basically. And when a lot of people become consumers because they have the money, automatically this whole society or whole economy starts growing, and the cycles run so fast. So yeah, you're right.
Totally agree. So that's my belief. So does that mean that we come up with a top level that at some point you don't get more money or you get a small? No, that's the concept of a eloquated is the wrong word. That's the concept of a type of tax system that as you get more and more, a higher percentage is taken away. And I believe in that within reason. You don't want to take away the incentive for someone. But does Jeff Bezos really need, or Elon Musk need $250 billion that you couldn't possibly spend if you tried? Or could we have free daycare for every kid or free child, food for kids so they get, this is now we're getting into another area of discussion to a degree, and I don't want to go there too much, but I believe in that. That doesn't mean you're not a capitalist. It doesn't mean you don't believe in rewarding someone for working hard. You start a store, you start a restaurant, you deserve to get the benefit of what that generates. And we know most businesses don't last. They fail. Some last, but most don't. And even some of the real successful ones eventually. What happened to Kodak? What happened to Blockbuster? What happens to these very successful businesses that tubed out very quickly? Well, they didn't stay growing. They didn't stay delivering the solutions that people needed. And so the world changed. And it does all the time. Even the Dow, the companies in the Dow have changed, right? It's not the same. So I believe there's really a lot of potential for so many people to live so well. Does it mean they're going to have 150 acres of land and a boat or a plane? Maybe not. But really, how many of us really need that? And I'm not sure yet. I don't know what the right answer is. And I'm not going to be the one to figure it out. I'll tell you that right now. But I do love the fact that the more we spread out the value of what we have in a macro sense, if you will, the more people that rise up above poverty into a reasonable middle-class existence. It was the middle-class existence that began post-World War II, by the way. If you go before World War II, back in the 1930s or 80s or 20s or earlier on, very few people were that wealthy. Most people were poor. The Great Depression comes in the 1930s. There were still people with a lot of money, by the way, but most people didn't. And what ended the Great Depression was World War II. Pulling people in the army, the need for more machinery, the more fashion, more K rations, more clothing, whatever it was, So and then post-World War II, we went into an incredible economic boom. Most of the world was blown up pretty good. World War II was World War I happened in a very confined geographic area. World War II was around the world, right? It really was, and things changed. And even post-World War II, the Indian subcontinent wanted to be free. The African continent, over the next 10 to 15 years.
And I think it changed everything after that.
Oh yeah.
If you see over all the economies, all the countries, it changed.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And for a good 20, 30 years, the United States dominated. We're very lucky. That was the years I grew up in as a kid and all. We were lucky, and the rest of the world had to catch up, but they have. Today, the world's very different, I think. Anyway, doesn't mean we can't compete greatly. It means we're not going to compete at the low end economically. That just isn't the way the world has grown. But the United States, we have great potential. We have incredible natural resources. We have, and by the way, I'm a big believer in immigration as well. People come, well, I am. It's my personal feeling that the people who come, immigrants, work hard.
Yeah.
They have low crime rates, they work hard, and which one of us doesn't come from an immigrant background?
Yeah, I think whole America is
Everybody,
all about,
100%,
Yeah.
except for a few Native American, Mohawks or Sioux or Cheyenne. Let's be honest, it's a very few number of people who haven't been treated all that well, but that's a whole aside. The rest of us are all immigrants or descendants of immigrants.